Hello, this is Lisa LaRose. Welcome to Connect to Love on the Vibrant Living Network here on PRN FM. And today I am so excited because you are in for an extra special treat. Not only do we have the wonderful Michael J. Russ, but we also have a very special guest. So if you've ever had that kind of connection with someone where you can feel them wherever they are in the world, you know what that feels like. And when they cross over, it's not the end. It continues. We still hold that love. It connects us to them well beyond this world. And our guest today has that very special connection. And it's amazing, because he's connected to Michael. Last week we did our show on nourishing generosity with love and how important it was to give and receive. And it was through that connection, that topic of conversation and how we transcend and find our purpose and really find fulfillment that Michael brought up a very dear friend of his, Joseph Higgins, Joe. So welcome, Joe, and welcome, Michael. And I'm going to let Michael kind of just share a little bit before I go into Joe's bio and let our audience know a little bit about him. So, Michael?
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. And, Joe, thank you so much for being on today's show. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I had a number of years ago, I think it was probably 8, if not 10 years ago, I went to Pittsburgh with a group of people, a large group of people, a couple of hundred, doing a program called Quantum Leap, and ran into Joe. And we cooked it off kind of immediately. I don't know exactly what the nature of what our conversation was at the time. It kind of went around, but I found out that I discovered that he was operating at the time he was in the insurance business. Yet also an author, writing some amazing books as a medium from his side gig at the time as a medium, which we'll learn here about how he's blossomed and matured into his role as a medium in his life. And I thought it was so amazing. We reconnected last week in a conversation, a phone call about arranging to be on the show, and I cannot tell you, it was like old home week for me, Joe, because it just brought back the feelings and everything that we shared, the camaraderie, like a little brotherhood thing going on. So thank you and welcome to the show. It's great to acquaint myself with you again after so many years.
Yeah, so just for our audience, Joe Higgins is a medium, an author, a channeler, and an intuitive counselor. He is a best-selling author on Amazon, and I ordered his book. I would encourage everybody to get I ordered the first one, which is Hello, Anyone Home. It's a guide on how our deceased loved ones try to contact us. And his latest book, there's 5 total, is always connected to those lost children, giving signs and insights from heaven, which I think is such a beautiful topic. But through his channeling, he has reached out and helped people here at Earth Plane to stay connected. And welcome, Joe. If you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about your journey and what brought you from where you were to this wonderful gift that you share with so many people.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, guys. And it's a wonderful opportunity to share a lot of the things I've learned over the years. And, Michael, when you said, we had met 10 years ago or 11 or 9 or something, it seemed like 2 years ago, It's just, how time flies. But the whole thing is about how we live our lives and the experiences we have. And then, you accumulate all this experiences, and then I think it's our responsibility to share it with other people because they might be going through different times or different periods of their life where we might be able to help them out. So what you guys do is fantastic, and I'm glad that, you do what you do, and you can help people on many different levels. So I think I'm just really happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. So we talk a lot on this show about faith, and I think that the premise of your first book and what Michael shared with me, that you have really trusted and stepped into faith, that when you were called and you started getting these messages, it was a big trust and a big step into something that was very unknown. And and for each one of our audience members who may not be familiar, would you share a little bit about that journey?
Sure. I mean, I was one of these people that had experiences when I was very young. So probably started when I was like 8 years old. And I became aware of things that were around me, but, the regular senses couldn't pick it up. You couldn't see it, or you couldn't touch it or something. But I had a sense that there was others around me, and that's, called clairsentient. And we all have that to a certain extent. If someone comes up behind you and they're kind of looking over your shoulder and you don't see them, but you get a sense that someone's there, you turn around and you're like, hey, that's being clairsentient. I just had it like on steroids, that type of thing, but when I was like 8 or 9 years old. And as I get older, I kind of push some of it away, but also, as you get older, you start, changes in your life. You start high school, you have relationships, you start your career or work if you're not, and stuff like that. But it was always there. It was always, on my mind, and I was always very curious about things, on how things worked and getting some answers. So, eventually I did make the leap. Like Michael had said, I had started my own business, my own insurance business, so that I could actually do more research on this whole subject and some of the abilities I had. So one was like my day job, one was my night job, and one was supporting the other. But I had to do it. So I just had, I had to, you got to make some sacrifices, and you have to have a lot of trust. But it's, as they say, it's the only way to fly, because you have to go for it in your life. You have to take chances, and you have to, because the last thing you do is you want regrets and stuff. So that's what I did. So I started really getting into it probably about 20, 25 years ago, a lot more. And then, all of a sudden out of that, I made a lot of connections, a lot of people. I started writing the books, and I developed my channeling. And I learned as I was going along. And then I decided, just before I started the books, I said, I need to share this information with people, because a lot of us that have these experiences are kind of isolated. And people, especially like 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, a lot of these people never talked about stuff like this, unless it was late at night, or maybe it was like, if you're having a cookout or something, at night, and people sitting around a fire or something like that, they might mention it, but usually no one talked about it. Now, in the last 20 years, we've had TV shows, we've had, these books, and a lot of these celebrities and stuff have talked about it, so people are more open about it, but there's still a lot of people that won't talk to people about it because they think they're going crazy when they feel like they've gotten a sign from a loved one that's passed over. And that's the reason I wrote the first book, Hello, Anyone Home, is because the woman I was seeing at that time, she was a widow, and she got all these signs, and she thought she was going crazy, until she started talking to some other groups of widows and realized they were having the signs too. So I think the second chapter in that book's actually named after, no, you're not going crazy. I think it was Nina influenced that one. But I wanted to get it out to something that was an easy read and people could relate to, because they've done studies, Pew studies and stuff like that. Anywhere between like 50 and 100 million people feel like they've had some type of signs from loved ones or colleagues that have passed over. So, and I'm afraid that a lot of them have them like silently without having to share them, because sometimes people that don't understand the process and stuff can try to like belittle them and stuff. But so that was my gig. I said, no, we're going to bring this open. We're going to let people know how it's done, when it's done, where it's done, and so that was the background and the basis for doing these books, is to get it out there so people are not alone with this information and kind of second and third guessing themselves. It all comes down to trust. I mean, it happens to me, and I know better. So I can imagine when the average person, gets a sign of something and they think, oh, I'm just making that up, and they're really not. So
Right.
I'm just very fortunate that I got to do something, and continue to do something in this life where I can make a a difference, at least on a small scale at some point.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Especially, I think, for people who have lost children, any unexpected, passings. In my life, I've had some really miraculous signs. When my grandfather passed, we called him Poppy. He didn't want to be called Grandpa, so we called him Poppy. And when he crossed, this very day that he crossed, a white poppy bloomed in my yard. I've never had a poppy before then, and I've never had one since, and it was white. And I just thought, instead of the traditional red or, the cherry color, it came sort of in that white. I knew that he was at peace and that he was in a beautiful space.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it is. It's I think when you have that, and you're absolutely right, Joe. It's about trust and not thinking that you're crazy. And you hear somebody say, you're imagining it. Well, I don't imagine the signs that I receive. I consider each one a blessing, and I always am grateful. Michael, I apologize. I interrupted you. You wanted to say something to Joe?
Oh, no, I just wanted to say that I, too, have a very interesting story, very briefly. When the night that my girlfriend's stepfather passed, we were out at her barn, and we knew that his passing was imminent. And we were on the east side of the barn, kind of looking up at the stars, because you can see a lot of stars. It's out in the middle of nowhere. And I was hugging her, and we were looking off in the eastern horizon, and all of a sudden we saw this it was too thick of a line to be a shooting star, and it was going straight up. It was going straight up, not across the sky like most shooting stars do. In the eastern horizon, when I watch most of the shooting stars, they come down left and right. This went straight up, a little bit thicker, and it lasted for probably, I'd say, a second and a half. Enough for me to say, hey, look at that. We both turned around, and we saw this beautiful streak of white light just shoot up into the heavens. And we learned the next day that was the approximate moment that her stepdad had passed away. And I thought, I've always remembered that, and it's just so beautiful. Neither of us were stricken with so much grief. We knew that he was having some problems, but I took that as a sign that was him saying goodbye.
Sure, absolutely, and that's the thing, is you still remember that to this day. And that's how you know it's a real authentic sign, is because you'll remember it for a very long time, and it hits you in a certain way where you just know, and they work that out too. A lot of times they will try to give us signs, and we're so busy they just go right over our head, and sometimes people will just blow them off like it's just a coincidence or something, and then they kind of have to work at it, but it's really our fault. But if we just let it in and say, okay, I'm going to accept that, they'll send other signs, and it'll be much more, it'll be easier to recognize, because you won't be playing those mental games like, what if, what is this? So they have all different ways of doing it. I mean, I love the group signs where, more than one person experiences it. And that's an example, Michael, of two people experiencing the same sign. And that's wonderful, because it reinforces the sign, and it takes the doubt away, because someone else saw it, or someone heard it, or experienced it, or smelled something. So I love those group signs, and they could be just two people, or it could be a group of 50. You never know. So they know what they're doing, and they've been doing it forever to get our attention, and so it's the easiest way for them to let us know that life continues, and it gives us a little snippet, a little view of the possibilities of our whole lives. And if people really understand that, they can think, well, wait a minute, there really is something bigger to this whole thing.
Oh, absolutely.
And like you said at the beginning of the show, Lisa, it's all about love, and the connection that we have continues on the other side, and it's a wonderful connection. That's why I named the series of my books "Always Connected," because you'll always have that connection.
Yeah, and I will share with you with a big smile on my face, because your latest book, The Always Connected, for those who've lost children, it has roses on there. My last name is LaRose, and it has a butterfly. And the day that after my mother's service, she crossed 8 years ago, I had a butterfly come and land on my knee. And she always used to call me, her butterfly. She said, you need to be free and soar like the butterfly. And when that happened, I knew it was her. And it was just a transition. And I miss the physicality of her, but I feel her around all the time. And, I'd love for you to share maybe some of the insights from heaven that you've received that just have really touched your heart or really impacted you.
Well, I think, some of the big ones that they sound like cliches, but they're not. They're really, one is to go easy on yourself, because we're in this situation where a lot of times we have a lot of self-guilt about situations and stuff, and this is like, life doesn't come with a instruction manual and stuff, so it's kind of, you really have to go with your gut instinct on a lot of things, but, especially with people that have regrets or people that have like, they were taking care of someone and did I do the right things, and, or should I let my son borrow the car that night that there was an accident and stuff. Go easy on yourself. There's a bigger picture going on. So they really want people to know that. They also want people to know that, the love does continue and that you will see them again. And especially with the children, when I was researching the book on the children, the thing that really blew my mind was, and I said it to the woman whose child I was bringing through, Carla was the little girl's name, and she said that when a parent passes over, if they choose, they're going to see their child. If they choose, they can relive all those years that the child was not here on the earth plane. So let's say Carla died, I think when she was 12 or 13. So her parents, when they get to the other side, if they want, they can relive her high school prom. They can relive, her getting married, grandchildren, all that if they want. So they're not going to miss something if that's what they wish to do. And I thought that was a big one. That blew my mind.
That's incredible.
That is mind-blowing. Hang on a second. Hold on a second. Let me see if I get this right. Are you talking about if they lose their child as if they lose a child, or if they pass away before their child fully grows up?
Sure.
Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, that's the best example because, if you're like 80 years old and your son dies at 60 and stuff, you can say, I've had a long life with my child, and of course, I expected to go first. But you could say, my child had a full life. He died at 60 or 67 or something like that. But when you lose a child very young, people think of all the milestones that they miss. The weddings, the graduations, the degrees or whatever, or the houses they build and children, everything. And so that's what they would be able to experience if they wish. They think, a lot of people think that's gone forever. We all did, until I learned that that's not true. Wow. So you can, when you get to the other side, not necessarily that you're going to do the whole thing, but you could do parts of it. But I tell people, I said, no, it's all there if you want. And I said, that includes the terrible teens too. So it's not, I said, it's not all cake and ice cream, if you're going to do it. So, because that you'll have that choice, but that's part of the deal. No one has a life full of relationships without some of those bumps there, and
exactly.
That's what part of being
human,
what makes it right.
That's part. Well, that's part of the relationship between two people, and so without that, things would get kind of stale quick. So I said to him, no, that comes with it too. So be prepared to have some arguments with the kids and stuff.
Well, we had a conversation. We had a conversation last week when I reconnected with you about something that Lisa and I have been talking about for the last several episodes of this show, and it's frequencies. And we had because I'm big into proactively managing your frequency and helping people understand how to use personal alchemy to make that happen. And you had said something to me about a story of a child who passed over, who was an old soul, and made some very interesting revelations about frequency. Would you mind sharing that with our audience?
I'm not exactly sure which story you're referring to, but
the one where you said. Go ahead. Well, the one where you said that's exactly what he said when I talked about perceptions and perception and reality.
Wait a minute, let me try to remember, because that was a reading I had given 2 hours before that, Michael.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Of course, sort of a serendipitous me connecting with you again, and the message that he gave you and how it related to what I do. I thought I was blown by that one.
Yeah, he did. He was talking because his mother was writing it down. His mother was going to write a book. She had already written one, but she was going to write another book about her experiences, with her son, that stuff that had come through for her, because she was getting stuff from her son. And the son wanted to talk about perceptions on how we go about our lives. And that's right, Michael. We were talking about focus and trying to raise our vibration so we're in a good state and being trying to be positive and things like that. And the young man was talking about that. He was talking about perceptions, if I can remember, on how we that's right. This kid was great because he did not have, that's right, he was an older soul. He was a young kid, and he didn't have any fear about the people around him making fun of him or, having to live up to their expectations. Drama just went off his back like water off a duck, which is unusual, especially when you're in your teens, because you're really sensitive to what your friends think and stuff like that. But this kid had come into this life, and he had already learned all that stuff. And so he was not here for a long time, but what he focused on, he could accomplish very quickly, because he did not let other people's expectations get to him and slow him down like we do sometimes. Especially if you're sensitive and stuff, it's tough because you're like, like when I wrote the book on the veterans, I'm like, oh my God, can I really write this book on veterans? I'm not a veteran and blah, blah, blah. And then I realized, hey, guess what? It's not about me. It's about the veterans. And then when I started writing it, my guides told me after I started writing it, they said, well, we picked you because you weren't a veteran, and that way you wouldn't have any preconceived knowledge or notions about the whole subject matter. I'm like, oh, now it makes sense. But before that, I'm sweating bullets, and I'm like, I'm going to be perceived as like, in front of veterans, that I'm like this jerk or something like that. But this young boy, if he was in that situation, he wouldn't even thought a second about it. He would have just put his head down and just started, and trusted right off the bat and started writing. So so feeling his energy was really special, because he just felt like an older, wiser person, even though he was much younger when he passed. And it's funny because when Michael and I were talking about it and how we want to manifest certain things and stuff, how to focus in your perception about what you want to do as opposed to what other people might expect of you, can really put a damper or put road bumps in front of you. And not people that might have some constructive criticism or something to help you along, something like that, but all the other drama that sometimes we fall into in our lives can hold you back. And I think that by staying on the path and staying focused and being your perspective on what you want to achieve, you can do it more quickly, with a higher vibration on a level where you're just not going to deal with the drama and the other stuff. It's kind of like reindeer games, right? The old expression, it's like,
right.
I'm not going to deal with those reindeer games because I got places to go, people to meet, things to do, right?
Right.
So I think, like what Michael, when you talk about, with the manifestations and stuff, that's one of the keys to doing that is getting yourself aligned in that type of perspective.
Right. Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Yeah, it absolutely. Joe, I'm curious, when you connect with individuals, and this is something that both Michael and I speak about a lot, that there is everything unfolds perfectly, even though we cannot see the wisdom of how things unfold on our path, that we need to meet certain people. There are certain things that need to happen, and that we have different places that we choose to exit. Would you comment a little bit about that, about the divine perfection in each of our journeys?
Sure. I mean, on the bigger scale of things, we do have a plan when we come here. There are soul plans, but they're not. They're overall objectives that we want to achieve. Okay, and then what happens is we put together a life plan, and a life plan is a little bit more specific of how we're going to go about to do it. And then on top of everything, we got free will, so that can throw everything out the window. So, exactly. So
that's certainly free will, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like great. It's like giving a penguin a hand grenade or something. It's like So for that, and we get stuck in this earth plane. But we also we travel in a soul group. There are many people that we come into this life with at different times, and a lot of times if you meet someone and you become fast friends, you can tell they're part of your soul group. And then there might be other people that come into your life to teach you certain lessons. We all take on different roles. And sometimes, if we, through free will, we decide to kind of like, as the expression says, go off the reservation, then what happens is we fall into another group's actions that are being played out, and we can incorporate those into our life plan. But we also might end up passing at a different time or not achieving what we wanted to do. Perfect example would be, let's say someone was hanging around with the wrong group and they ended up going to a concert or something, and instead of 2 children that were going to pass in a car accident together was the agreement, a third would have passed, because on a higher level, that child would have said, hey, listen, you know something? I've already accomplished a lot of things. I'm going to go with you guys. And they decided to take one of their exits. When we come here,
wow.
I felt there's always been you have 2 or 3 exit plans, opportunities. Some people say you might have a little bit more. But I learned this also from this young girl, Carla, because she actually showed me, because the parents wanted to know if they had anything they could have done to, they felt a lot of guilt. And she showed me what was happening, and she actually showed a visualization of a highway, and there was an exit ramp that she took, and then a little while up there was I could see another exit ramp, and then the end of the road was there, and it became very abrupt, and I'm like, wow, this is kind of a weird road. It's like the road just stopped. And I said to the mother and father, I said, she decided to take this one because if she took the second one, she would have brought more stress, anxiety, and pain to you guys, the family, than if she did this one. And I said, the road ends, so she's telling me she wouldn't have had a long life. And they just took a deep breath, and they were just so relieved. And I'm like, I don't understand what this means. And it turns out, well, Carla had passed in an accident, an ATV accident, very quickly. And what I didn't know was that she suffered from, I think it was a rare blood disease, and that she wouldn't have lived past 20 or 21. And eventually she would have been bedridden, in the hospital, and then bedridden for many years, for a few years, and then the parents, people have to take care of her, the whole 9 yards. That was probably the second exit that I had seen. and then the end of the road was she would have a shorter lifespan. She was a very wise soul, and even her mother said she acted like an old soul. And a lot of times they do because they are. Sometimes they can hide it. Sometimes someone can just be a regular kid and stuff, but still be an old soul. But in her situation, I felt it right off the bat, and it was coming through. And she said, "Oh yeah, she was like that." But it was the first time I'd actually visualized the exit opportunities that we have. And she explained it so well that was another wow moment from one of the readings I had given to explain how these things can happen. But like I said, free will's involved, so you have to be careful. There's an example in my book of but let's say someone wants to come here to save someone from drowning, let's say, and and all the things that are connected with that, and for whatever purposes, maybe the person that drowned, and for their development and self-sacrifice and all that stuff. So the person decides they're going to be born in Britain, and they're going to go into the Navy. That's the life plan, and then the opportunity will come up where someone else might need assistance, and one of their objectives in their life will be to help this person. So the person is born into Britain, and before he joins the Navy and stuff, he goes on a trip to the United States with friends. Okay, and they go to California. And in California, they're young, takes up surfing. He says, "I love this. I'm not going back to Britain. I'm moving to California." He moves to California, and what happens is he's on the water all the time. Sure enough, he has the opportunity to save someone that was drowning. So what happens is you have the soul plan, which was accomplished. You have the life plan that was changed through free will. Okay, he was supposed to be in the Navy in England. Instead, he moves to California, becomes a surfer, but is still on the water. You know what I mean? So through free will, the life plan was changed, but the overall soul plan came to fruition the way the main way it was supposed to happen. So that's an example of how through free will we can still accomplish a lot of things. Things change because other people have influences on us, and we come into other people's roles that they're playing. So, but usually those things can be incorporated. The stuff that we need to learn and experience and things like that. One of the big things I learned too is a lot of people that die, a lot of the children that die young, or people that die of violent deaths and stuff like that. When they come back, if they want to come back, they're usually in some type of service field, like a medical, a doctor, or a counselor, maybe a fireman or a police officer, something where they interact with the public and try to help them, because they have this experience that they've had before dealing with these situations, or having been through certain ones. I found that a lot, especially in the medical field, and counselors. Grief counselors or psychiatrists and stuff.
Wow,
that's interesting.
Yeah,
I
know it is.
I mean, I'm not too blown away by the fact that might be the way that they might come back. It's interesting, though, on another hand, to think it and then kind of have some greater insight into it. There's something I'd like to approach. We talked about this a little bit last week too. I had told you that I'd lost a couple of pets in the last 2 years, one recently, a couple of months ago. And you had some interesting comments about pets and how they have soul groups as well. Could you kind of expound upon, I know a lot of people in our audience have lost pets and their family, just like everybody else. But you had, like I said, some really cool things to say. So could you kind of expound upon it just a little bit?
Actually, Michael, when we were at that conference, I met a lady who was she was a pet, what do they call them, pet psychics or something. They make connections with animals and stuff.
Right.
And I was, the jury was still out for me, because when I started all this thing and I started doing my development with a friend, we decided that we were going to do this like really scientifically, and we're going to go through the whole thing, and we're going to use logic and stuff like that. And then, we finally get to the point where we're like, all right, this is, there's something going on here, because we really kind of tore it apart. So I was open to the idea, but I really didn't have any experiences with it until, I had talked to this particular woman. And then I had some colleagues that actually did have some experiences with communicating with some people's pets. So I trusted them, and I was like, something, all right, it sounds pretty good to me. And anyway, so that was years ago, and probably about 4 or 5 years later, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I saw my dog when I was a kid, okay, when I was the first dog we had. I had a golden retriever, and it was three-dimensional, and it was kind of glowing, and it was right off the side of my bed, and I'm like, I could just see it probably from the neck up, and I'm like, what the hell? And I'm thinking to myself, what's he doing here? And I'm like, this is kind of new. This is a new experience, and I'm like, I like it. It's kind of cool. And, now I'm wide awake at 4 o'clock in the morning, but I'm like, what's this? And all of a sudden, I saw another dog come up and came almost nose to nose with the first dog. The other dog was my sister's dog that was still alive.
Oh, my goodness.
And I'm like, oh, my God. I'm like, that's Charlie. And he was a Highland Westie. He's a Westie. And I'm like, that's Charlie. And then I'm like, that's really strange. And he was kind of glowing. He was three-dimensional, but I could see his face, everything about it. And nose to nose with the golden retriever. And I'm like, what is this deal? And then all of a sudden, I became fully aware of what was going on, and I just started to cry. What happened was, that's when I learned that animals travel in soul groups, and my older dog was coming and greeting this other dog that was getting ready to pass. And I could feel the love between them and the connection, and there was this overwhelming feeling of such an honor to be able to experience this wonderful, wonderful greeting of these two beings that I had no idea that animals could do something like this. And so I sat there, and I was like a baby crying. And then, after it happened, I always sleep with a notebook and a pad of paper and a pen. I wrote notes for the next 2.5 hours till about 6:30 in the morning, and because I thought it was, obviously it was very, very important, because it was one of the wildest experiences of my life, and I wanted to share it with other people. So I called my sister about 7:30, maybe 7 o'clock, after I finished taking all my notes, and to tell her, I said, listen, I just saw Charlie. What's the deal? Is he sick or something? So she wasn't home, so I left a message. So finally, I called a couple times during the day. She wasn't around. So finally, about 4 o'clock, she calls me back. I'm like, listen, what have you been? I've been trying to call you and stuff. I had this weirdest dream last night that, I saw Buffy and Charlie. And she was like, oh, we had an awful time last night. Charlie had seizures or something like that, and he had to be put down. Or I think he passed away. I'm not sure if he was put down or passed away or something. And I'm like, oh my God! So that was the validation that was there for me to realize that this was not made up, that this was actually happening, and that it was a wonderful experience. And I had contacted a couple of colleagues and stuff because I had never heard of it, and they're like, oh yeah, that's called. And I don't forget what the expression is, like a psychopomp or something like that, where you can actually watch the transition from one entity to another, by another one, crossing over. I didn't know. And they're like, oh yeah, that's something. And I'm like, well, that's new to me. You know what I mean? But and then about a year ago, it happened again, and this time I saw Charlie's face, the Westie, and I'm like, oh my God, now what are you doing here? It's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I saw. I saw my sister's other dog. He came up and went nose to nose. And so I was like, oh no, don't tell me he's going to pass. And I knew that he was having problems. And he was another terrier, but they have a lot of breathing problems, that particular, that terrier, Scottish terrier. And Scotty, his name was Scotty. So he was being met by his brother. So the next morning, I called my sister. I said, well, what's the deal? And she said, well, Scotty had passed away in the middle of the night, because he was, at that point he was on medication and stuff like that. And, they just didn't know when. but I got to witness that too, and it was absolutely amazing. It just blows my mind. But it brings me so much comfort because, and I think the reason they told me about that is so I can share it with other people of what I saw twice, and that there is an expression for it. I guess that, it does happen to other people over the ages. It has happened, but it's just so I can share it and let people know that when their loving pets pass over, they are greeted by. They're not alone. They're greeted by other pets in their soul group, and it was just amazing. You can't. It's hard to explain seeing the two faces come together and the love and the joy that's passing from one animal to the other. It's like it blows your mind. It really is. It's a type of love that's incomparable. I mean, you can't incomprehensible. I can't explain it. And I think that's a snippet of the other side too. It's a type of love where you can't explain it. I mean, we have love here, and they have love there. It's like magnitudes high.
Exponential. Yeah.
Yes.
Exponential in terms of depth.
Yep.
Which I have.
And that's why I cried for 2 hours while I was watching. When I was taking notes.
I can imagine.
Yeah, you have a beautiful, tender heart. I mean, what a moving. I do dog rescue and all animal rescue, and I'll share with you that when my one shepherd crossed, it was so interesting because I found out about a dog that I went to go help in Ohio and brought it back, and when I made the mistake of bringing my stepdaughter with me, and she's like, look, there's another shepherd there, we can't leave it. And I thought, no, I'm not ready.
Yeah, right.
And I came home without it. Just wanted this senior dog, and a few days later when the dog came off of the list, I went back to pick it up, and it was so interesting because it refused to get in my car. It growled at me, and as soon as it got in the house, it peed on the entryway. But then when my mother walked in, it greeted my mother just like my other dog. And I think the reason that it was, I don't know if it was a soul exchange or what. I'd love to hear your comments about it. But my dog had a very distinct way of wrapping his paws around my mother's legs, and this shepherd didn't even know her. So it was very, very interesting. I think sometimes when you're that connected and deeply in love, that you do, there is some, on the animal sense, that there is some sort of a soul exchange that's possible.
Oh yeah, there's a recognition. Yeah,
right.
They're really, because they're dealing on a higher level of sensitivity than we are. But yeah, that was meant to be. Like, you were just the courier for, the connection between the dog and your mother. It's amazing because, I call them like, you're in the business of it. They're like little angels, and they really are. They teach us so much, and they bring so much unconditional love, and it's an amazing entity that these animals are, and that's so cool when something like that happens.
Yeah,
they know.
I'd love for you to speak, Joe, about unconditional love, because from what I understand, on the other side, even though if you had an argument with the person before they pass, there is no recognition of that it is only unconditional love, that they are connecting with us. Is that what you have found to be the case?
Not necessarily. It's a little bit more complex. I mean,
okay.
Let's say there was abuse in the family. Okay. Some people are on different levels of enlightenment and different levels of growth, so that when they get to the other side, there's understanding. There's definitely a huge perspective change, and so there is a connection of love, absolutely, and you can actually see where the other person was coming from when they were on the Earth's plane, and so I think there's a recognition there, and it's a different unconscious. It's a different type of love. It's almost like the love of let's say a mother to a child that just broke her favorite vase or something, or broke something in the house, and it's like, oh, I want to strangle this kid, but they're kind of like it's a child, right? It's an accident.
Okay.
So you kind of have that experience that of why certain things happen, not that you necessarily agree with it happened, but you accept the parameters around why it happened in that particular situation. Another good example is when I wrote the book for veterans, a lot of times the veterans want to know if they're going to run into the people that they had killed on the in combat on the other side. And they have that opportunity, if they wish, to meet some of their the enemy, if they wish. And that is a very, very highly spiritual meeting. And from what I learned was when it happens, it's a very, very strong connection, a loving connection, and respectful. And it's really wonderful. It's healing, and it's a different perspective when you get on the other side. They can see a lot more than we can see, and that was a lot of strong love and a lot of connection. Not everyone takes that when they get to the other side because we still carry a lot of our a little bit of our baggage and our personalities and all our experiences when we get to the other side. So it might take a little while for us to filter some of that out. But if the person does want to take that opportunity, then it's there, it's available, and it's a huge step in their spiritual soul growth if they decide to do something like that. And that's kind of like an extreme case, but I thought it'd be a good example because it's a lot of soldiers do have that, especially if they killed like a soldier or a civilian by accident or something like that. They want to know how that would help. How would that be held against them or anything like that on the other side? And it's not. Unless,
I imagine it was a very emotional book for you to write. And just.
Well, yeah, it was. It was very. I was going to write the children's books first, but I put it off because the veterans book had to be written because there were so many suicides coming, around because of all the soldiers coming back after multiple tours. And I wanted to write it about, the suicides, about like 50 questions that soldiers have, and a lot of the things around it. And one of the biggest things is perspective. A lot of times they come back here and they don't see the bigger picture, and they're making judgments about themselves that they don't have all the information about. And one of the comments that one of the deceased soldiers came back was, a lot of those questions answers were above my pay grade. And I thought that was kind of the way he said it. And it's true because they didn't know until they get to the other side. And so a lot of insights I got from the soldiers on the other side really brought a lot of context to war in general. And it was very interesting. And I wrote the children's book in the same manner that I wrote the veterans book. I wanted overall information from my guides about overall the topic of that particular book, but I also wanted insights from the soldiers, and from the children's book, insights from the children, and because it just gives a different perspective of when they're on the other side. And then I wanted sign stories, which I got in both of them from parents that had signs from their children. So I think it was a nice way of having like a 3 different angles in the same book, and they were all kind of like supporting each other, but coming from different perspectives, and they kind of validate each other, which is important, and that's what I try to do in these very deep, heavy books. The other books, like the sign books, are just, they're great. That's basically information on how things work, and lots of good sign stories that are really cool, and just make people kind of makes them smile. People read them at night, and it just brings a little peace and joy to them because, it's just some of them are so fun. So.
Yeah.
But
the question,
you have to work it. Go ahead.
What popped into my head here is we talked about free will a little earlier. When it comes to veterans and war and men and women dying in war, how much is free will a part of that? Did you ever look at that aspect of it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because some people come here for a short period of time, and they know that one of their outlets is they're going to pass in a war. Okay, they only need to come and do a few things or something. So that might be their gig. Other people might decide that it's an exit because they have completed certain things. Other people might decide, something. No, I want to fight. I want to join the army with my buddy, and they go, and so they change their free will. Through free will, they might change things, but in their experiences on the battlefield or organization and stuff, they might learn a lot of things they came here for. Okay, because they got to they got to go to boot camp together. They might learn about sacrificing certain things for themselves for the betterment of the group. It could be a whole litany of things because it really is a whole different lifestyle. But in that lifestyle, there's still plenty of life opportunities. And another thing in the veterans book, they all have a lot of them come back with this great sense of humor. And some of the stories they talk about, are these stories that they have while they were in war, and how one particular one was hysterical. I mean, it was guys are coming through. There's like three of them on the other side, and they're in a tank, and they're one of the guys driving the tank, and they pull into this field, and there's this giant field, and it's like you see like in pictures and stuff. There's like one tree, and the rest of the field is just like just nice and flat and stuff like that. Well, the guy driving the tank hits that one tree, and his buddies just tore him apart. It's like, are you kidding me? We already got rid of all the trees. He goes, we got one tree left, and you got to knock it down. And they just busted him up, and it was hysterical because I could feel them, just ragging on him, and he was laughing. He's like, I know. He says, there's only one tree left, and I got to take it out. And he says, I should have zigged when I zagged. So they learn that even though they decided to go to war, they did have those experiences that they might have here, where they could be joking around and just jousting with different people here about screwing up all the regular civilian life and stuff. But it's they don't have anything to worry about when they get to the other side. A lot of that guilt that they have, they don't need to worry about it. The only ones that do, and I've been thinking about it in the last 3 or 4 months, is if they're in combat and through free will they decide to commit like war crimes. Okay, right. So people, some of the stories that people were worried about and stuff. It's like, oh no, I bombed this area or something, like in collateral damage. I took out some civilians and stuff, or I didn't know this person or something like that. It's all intention. When you go to war, you're trained to kill and you're trained to protect and stuff. That's all built into you. So that's the way you're treated to act. Your intention of what you're doing is what sets you apart from others that decide to. There are certain people, individuals that are in war that take great happiness from inflicting pain that doesn't necessarily have to be inflicted on certain people. Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing a lot of that now. Now, when they get to the other side, they're going to have a little bit of a problem. They're going to have a problem. They're going to have to deal with that. Yeah. Because through free will, through free will, they not only did they not do something they were supposed to do, but they did something that on a soul level they weren't supposed to do.
Right. So they'll have to account for that, atone for that one way or the other.
Yeah, they're going to have to account for it.
Right.
And,
there's a quote, Joe and Michael, and it's life is full of bridges to new, unknown, and often uncharted destinations. Listen to the inner voice when determining which to cross and which to pass. And I think about that a lot. And I'd love for you, Joe, to comment, because you've been speaking about your guides. Do they just come through to you when you're in a reading with somebody, or do you find that they intercede and help sort of keep you on that path and knowing which bridges to cross and which ones to pass?
They really do. They're here just like the name. They're here to guide us. They cannot make decisions for us. They cannot interrupt us. If we ask for their help, they will try to help us, and they will guide us. What we have to do is we have to kind of let our guard down and use our intuition. We come here with certain skills. We come here with certain abilities, and sometimes we activate them, sometimes we don't. One of the great healing things we come here was the ability for humor and laughter. great. It's healing. It's one of the tools in our toolboxes. But another one is, our perceptions and our intuition. And it's huge because it cuts right through a lot of the logic and stuff like that. And, the old saying, I got this gut instinct. It's there for a reason. And it really can tell you, give you insight to what's going on. But you can contact your guides, anytime you want. You come with one master guide and, a guardian angel, and they're kind of with you for life. And then you have other guides that come in and out of your life for particular reasons. And so I tap into a few of them. Sometimes I'll call upon them, just say, hey, how are you guys doing these days, And just, everything's going cool
great,
here.
Though.
Well, also because I'm also picking
sandwich with me. Something like
that,
right?
Well, I picked their brain. With me. Yeah, well, listen, I fired a couple of times too. My technical guys, I'm trying to type stuff for a book and stuff, and my computer goes out. I'm like, really, guys, right now? I'm like, you're fired. And then, of course, 3 hours later, I'm saying, I'm sorry, please come back. But I like to do research with them. I find out what they can tell us and what they can't tell us, and I try to put some of that stuff in the book so people can get a better idea of, why didn't you save my son, or why didn't you do this? Because they don't have that ability. And there are certain times where they can interact to save a life or to change a situation. Those are they're rare, but we do hear about them. I've experienced one, and people, people sometimes in their lives, you hear about other people's stories where they will experience something like that, and for whatever reason, that it just, I don't know why, maybe because other influences came in that was not supposed to be anywhere near, someone's life plan or something like that to disrupt it, and it was and they interceded. So that does. There's a couple stories on angels and stuff in one of the books, and some people have told me.
Beautiful.
And, really. So it does happen. They can actually physically appear. They can appear as they can come through other people, and while let's say I'm talking, and someone could think like, oh my God, he sounds just like my husband. You know what I mean? And they can do that on purpose. No, so a sign and stuff can get through. They can do that. Well, no, I've seen it personally with people I know that, and I've experienced it too. That these people will come up to you and they'll say something to you, and you'll be like, how did they know that about me? They don't even know me. Right. It's the way they say it with a gentle voice, and it's just passing by. And it's like all of a sudden you get this chill down your spine. It's like, wait a minute, that was a connection. On the other side, that was one of my guides that just actually verbalized it through someone else. And they can do it through vision. They can do it through audio. Some people will hear someone's voice in the other aisle and say, oh my God, that's so-and-so. And you run over there, and it's not, or there's no one there. So there are different ways for them to connect with us. But the easiest way for them to connect to us and for us to connect to them is in our dreams. So if someone one of your listeners want to connect with their guide, you can ask to meet your guide. Say, please come to me in one of my dreams. Keep a note paper and a pad next to your bed. And you might have the opportunity to meet one of your guides and just kind of like chill out with them. Or learn to meditate.
Yeah. Now, Joe, if our audience members would like to reach out to you for a reading, do you still do readings for the public?
Yes, I do. I do readings, and I can.
Or if they want to try to get in contact with you, or just mostly through your books, purchase your books.
Right. They can go to my website, joehiggins.com.
Okay.
So that's probably the easiest way. joehiggins.com.
Joe Higgins.
joehiggins.com. And I when we're on this show, Joe, you were talking about time flying. I looked at the clock and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're coming towards the end, and I really wanted to make sure that if people, the books are so beautiful, the topics are so touching, and I'm so excited to delve in. It's such an honor and a pleasure to have you, and I would encourage all of our listeners here on Connect to Love on the PRN FM to please tune in and go to joehiggins.com and also on Amazon. The books are outstanding, and I'm going to let you and Michael sign off. I'm so grateful, and I'm grateful to the guys that connected our conversation last week.
Sure.
So it's just been an honor and a delight, and I hope that you'll join us again, because I feel like we're just touching the surface of great
absolutely
conversations.
Yeah,
I
we've got to.
Yeah.
I definitely was thinking we need to do this again in a couple of weeks, or whenever Joe has some time and like to come back. There are lots of beautiful tangents to this topic. But Joe, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to reconnect with you again, and what you had to say today to me was just, I know it's going to set a lot of our listeners at ease and give them greater comfort when it comes to death and dying and connecting with those who've passed beyond. And I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to have connected with you today. All right?
Well, I thank you, Michael, and I thank you, Lisa, for putting this all together, because we're all here to help others, and it's not a coincidence that Michael and I hooked up again, because it was meant to be. And I look forward. I'd love to talk to you guys again, because time flies. It just, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about.
We'll do it again. We'll connect it up. We'll hook it up.
Yes.
All right?
Okay, take it easy.
Abundant
Bye-bye.
blessings to you all. Thank you.
Take care, Joe.
Bye-bye.
Be well.